Today we're going to take a look at one of my favorite plugins, Trackspacer. It's an amazing mixing tool. You can use it on any instrument, even voices. But today I'm going to show you how I use it to carve out space for my bass when I've got a kick there and I don't want to use something like sidechain compression. Now, sidechain can be a great tool, but sometimes you want to leave pretty much all of the sounds intact, but you just want to carve out a little bit of room for that kick so that your mix sounds good. Now, as I play you this song I'm working on, what I want you to be listening for is the kick and the bass. I want you to hear where those frequencies are hitting, and as more drums get introduced, you can see that there's some flaws there. There's a lot more room for dynamics if I can find that pocket in between the sub bass and the kick. So let's take a listen to this before I add Trackspacer, and then I'll run through how to use it. Super easy. All right, so you get the gist of it. The mix sounds good, but as I turn it up louder, especially listening on speakers, I notice a lot of distortion between the kick and the bass, and it didn't allow me a lot of room for these drums that come in later. So I'm going to add Trackspacer to my bass chain. I have two different layered basses, and well, one is a sub and one is the mid and highs, and I'm putting Trackspacer on the group of both of them. And all you need to do to use Trackspacer is sidechain whatever sound you want to come into the instrument you're working with, and it's going to carve out those frequencies automatically for you. So I'm just going to take kick, because that's what I have my kick drum labeled as, and I put that into sidechain, and let's open up Trackspacer and take a look before we listen. Now, what you have here is you have this graphic EQ. It's not something you're actually going to be able to use. It's just a visual reference. All of your knobs you're going to be using are going to be seen here. The amount knob is going to be the amount of EQ cut that is applied. You're going to have a low cut, which will make sure that this is not applied to the lows, or a high cut, which means that nothing will be applied to anything in this high area. And then you have this blue circle, which brings out a few other options. You have pan, you have left, right, and mid side for the EQ, attack and release, and sidechain. Let's close that for now. Then you have this freeze EQ, which we'll get to in another tutorial when I'm using this on vocals. But for today, let's just listen to what this sounds like as I play around with that mount knob. So as you can hear, it's similar to sidechain compression, but what's amazing about this is it leaves alone any frequencies that aren't in whatever track you are sidechaining it to. So that way, you're not losing everything and getting that complete cutout sound, but you're really focusing on the frequencies that may be clashing with each other. Now, as I play around with this, the first thing I do when I'm using this on a bass and a kick is I bring this high cut down somewhere around 150 hertz. And the reason I do that is because I am really only wanting to mess with everything below. Even though this kick has very little highs and mids, I don't want it to touch that. I just want the sub to get cut. So let's take a listen now. That sounds great. Now, I find that this kick is a little bit long, and although I can use this attack and release to kind of adjust the length of time that we're getting these cuts, sometimes I like a visual representation. And so what I did here was I copy and pasted my kick, but I created a second version of the kick, which I'm calling Ghost Kick, and I made it shorter with a fade and by dragging it to the left a bit. So it has the same frequency range, but I made it shorter because I want this sidechain effect to be quicker. And I turned off the audio here so that we're not hearing the ghost kick, but as long as it's has some volume here, even though we're not hearing it, that's what's going to be telling Trackspacer how much to bring down the frequencies. So I'm going to just change this sidechain now to ghost kick instead of kick, and now I should have a shorter. Yeah, that sounds much tighter to me. So let's listen to this now in the mix, and as you'll hear, I'll turn it on and off a few times. You'll hear that this is now a way, way better mixed track, at least the bass and the kick. So let's take a listen. Gonna turn it off now. Let's bring it back in. And off. One more time on. Off. So there you have it, Trackspacer. An amazing plugin. I highly recommend it. It's not too expensive, and I guarantee it's going to help your mixes come to life really quickly. Not sponsored by these guys. I'm just sharing one of my favorite plugins to getting my mixes tight quickly. I'll see you guys soon, right here or at mrmango.com.